Hello there! Welcome to the Siege of Orgrimmar Flex Guide. My name is Tusky, and today we will discuss Wing 3 of the Siege of Orgrimmar, the Underhold. We'll be covering everything you need to pull your weight in a flex run, be it a pickup group or a guild run. Now, just to clarify, this guide assumes that you already know the basic LFR level abilities of each boss. If you don't, click the annotation on screen now to go to this wing's LFR guide. Once you're caught up, we'll talk flex, the differences it has from LFR, and how to prepare. Now, let's get started. Let's start with an item level requirement. From my own personal experience running this wing, I've noticed that the bosses really start to bite now. I suggest a minimum item level of 540 for the tanks and healers, and 530 for the DPS. Getting some well-geared players in your run will really help, but not nearly as much as players who know what they're doing. Use your own judgment here, but you don't want a group where a few people carry lots of others. It probably just won't succeed. If you're aiming to run this wing with a pickup group, you should find plenty of takers. You can use the in-game raid finder to find or start a group, and there are online sources like OpenRaid and in-game add-ons like OQ to help you with finding a group. As always, you can find links to these in the description. With a group of 10, I'd suggest 3 healers, 2 tanks, and 5 DPS. When you're at about 15 players, you'll want another healer, and another near 20. Finally, you'll want to go up to 6 healers with a full 25-man group. You won't need 3 tanks for this wing. If you have healers that can switch to DPS, then they'll be really helpful in this wing. If you're a DPSer, you'll want to be capable of putting out a complete minimum of 140 to 160,000 DPS, so after 5 minutes or so on a training dummy. It's somewhat of a leap from the last wing, but there are a couple of fights here where strong DPS will make things much easier. Generally, it'll be impossible to tell what everyone's DPS will be, especially in a pickup group, but you should be able to judge your chance of success from the trash and the first boss. The trash up to the first boss is just like it is in LFR, just a touch tougher. Remember that the Skull Splitters gain damage and attack speed if any of the other adds die near them, and that combined with their serrated rampage cleave attacks can destroy just about anyone, including an unprepared tank. Try to face them away from the raid. Remember that they can be stunned. On to the first boss, Malkorok. He hasn't changed from LFR, but the numbers have increased significantly. Tanks you'll want to continue swapping at about 15 stacks. Keep the boss in the centre of the room. Healers make sure to blanket heal the raid to keep their shields high, and remember that those soaking the purple pools will take high damage, and that the shield also blocks falling damage. So spot healing combined with good situational awareness is great here. It is imperative that everyone gets the mechanics of this fight right. If more than a single pool is allowed to damage the raid, it's more than likely that you're going to wipe. The breath won't just hurt you, it will probably just kill you. Make sure that you have someone assigned to marking the locations of the smashes with world markers. If you are marking, try to place the markers exactly in the centre of the smash, and no matter what you're doing, give yourself plenty of room to avoid the breath. The purple pools spawn just about every time Malkorok does a smash. In Flex, you'll get more, and remember that the damage from standing in one does not split. If you see someone already standing in a pool, don't join them or you'll be taking unnecessary damage. After 3 smashes, a breath, 3 more smashes, and another breath, Malkorok will enter phase 2, and you'll have to stack on the tank. No one should get this wrong because the raid damage is very high here. Remember to use personal survivability spells and health stones. Any off healing is great here. Move out of the raid if you get the dispellable debuff. Healers, make sure people are outside of the raid before dispelling them or you're going to kill people. Onwards towards the next boss. The trash here is just as it is in LFR. The trash up to the Iron Sentinels is easy compared to the trash up to Malkorok, but you'll need to be somewhat coordinated with the Iron Sentinel trash. Ranged, remember to kill the Shredder pilots to stop the ads spawning. Tanks, try to share out the Sentinels and spread them out, as they have a stacking buff if they're near other Sentinels. When fighting the storeroom guards, make sure to watch for the Arcweaver reinforcements. They'll place purple pools under the mobs that will heal them for large amounts of health. Tanks, move them out of the purple pools. On to the spoils of Pandaria. This boss has changed dramatically in Flex. How? Well, the mechanics actually matter now. In my experience, this fight was the biggest hurdle a raid had to get over in order to succeed in this wing. The largest problem here is people not knowing what they're doing. We'll do a quick recap to help. There are 2 sides, Mantid and Mogu. You'll want to split up the raid into true groups, with at least 1 tank and 1 healer in each. If you're raid leading, look at the DPS meters for Malkorok and split up the DPS so that it's as equal as it can be. If you have more than 1 Bloodluster, so a Shaman, Mage, or a Beast Mastery Hunter with a Corehound pet, split them up too, so that each side has a Bloodlust. Use world markers to signify what groups go where. For the Mogu side, the massive crates have bosses that do raid damage and summon stone statues. The statues move around and do shockwaves. Avoid the shockwaves or you'll get stunned. The boss will do more damage the more statues are alive, but you should be able to just nuke the boss down fast if you have good DPS. Otherwise, kill the statues first to help lower the raid damage. The large crates contain either a Shadow Ritualist or an Anima Golem. If it's the Shadow Ritualist and his Phylactery, he'll do a Dispellable debuff, put runes on the floor, and channel forbidden magic. Interrupt him, dispel his debuff, and move things out of his runes. If it's an Anima Golem, move enemies out of the Crimson Reconstitution pools or they'll heal, and stand in the red beams of light to avoid heavy raid damage. This is very important. The small crates will contain either an animated Stone Mogu, who does a Dispellable debuff and damage to the raid with Stone Shard. Interrupt its spells if you can. Also in the crates are Burial Urns, which continuously summon sparks of life. The sparks do AoE damage and wander around the room. Kill the urn, then the sparks. The sparks pause and then do a large AoE when they die, so move away from them. Finally, in the small crates could be Quillen Guardians. They stack a debuff on the tank, just AoE them down. Over on the Mantid side, the massive crates will spawn a commander boss that will do raid damage and use set to blow on people. Use your extra action button to place the bombs around you, but try to do it in a corner away from the raid. If you don't use your extra action button, you'll die. If you stand near bombs that have already been placed, when they explode, you'll die. Bombs are bad. Watch your feet. The large crates have either an Amber Priest, which summons adds and uses residue on them, which heals them and can be dispelled with offensive dispels like Purge, or a Wind Wielder, who summons tornadoes that whirl in a line and buffs mobs with Rage of the Empress, which increases their damage and, again, can be dispelled with offensive dispels. The small crates can have Bombardiers in them, who throw bombs. Stay spread out to avoid taking lots of AoE damage from them. They'll also throw wind bombs that leave a trail, so stay out of it. The small crates may also contain amber-encased Kunchongs, who throw pools of pheromones under people's feet. Stay out of them, or you'll die. Remember tanks, the amber-encased Kunchongs can't be tanked. Finally, the small crates can also contain a Warcaller, which enrages for bonus damage on the tank. It can be dispelled with anti-enrage effects. You'll want to Bloodlust on the second Mogu boss of your quadrant. DPS, try to use your cooldowns on every boss. There's one more type of crate here, the Pandaren Goods. There are 2 of these in each quadrant, and although you don't gain energy for killing what spawns out of them, instead the raid gets powerful buffs. Before you open any other crates, you want to open both of these and kill the Pandaren spirits that spawn from them. If you have high mobility, open up a far Pandaren crate and then run back to the tank who's likely going to be near one of the closer ones, so that they can get aggro. The spirits will be one of the 3 monk specs, a Windwalker, a Mistweaver, or a Brewmaster. The Windwalker hits very hard and will jump at players, paralysing them. This can and should be dispelled. They'll also leave a path of blossoms behind them when they do this. Don't stand in it. The Mistweaver heals for damage she does, and does a Gusting Crane Kick, a small channeled AoE around her that pulls the raid in towards her. Run against it to avoid getting caught. Finally, the Brewmaster has a combo of 2 abilities. He hurls kegs at the raid to apply a slow, and then does a Flame Breath, where he slowly turns around breathing fire in front of him for damage. If you have the keg toss debuff and you get hit by the fire, you'll be disoriented. If you're the tank and this happens to you, you'll lose aggro and people will die, so avoid this at all costs. Once the Pandaren spirits die, you can right-click their corpses to gain buffs for all raiders of a role. No matter who clicks on the corpse, all players of a role will gain a buff, so click on the corpses no matter what. The Windwalker gives DPS a damage buff, the Mistweaver gives healers a tidal wave when they heal that damages and heals things in front of them, and the tanks gain a stun on hit with a 15-second cooldown. It's very important that every raider knows this fight, and that they can pull their own weight. With each group containing fewer healers and only 1 tank, if one of these people makes a mistake, it can easily lead to a wipe. Moving on to Thok the Bloodthirsty. The trash up to him is just as it is in LFR. The bats do AoE raid damage, the pterodactyls carry people into the air, slowfall if you can, and do large AoE raid damage, and the Mushun does a cleave, and the Yeti charges about. Thok himself is much more difficult on Flex than he is on LFR. Here he doesn't change phases dependent on his health, rather he'll change phases depending on the raid's health. When someone in the raid goes below 50% health, they gain a debuff called Bloodied. This does nothing but signify they're under 50% health, and when they go above 50% health, it goes away. When a large portion of the raid with this debuff are close together, which they will be because you're stacked, then Thok will enter phase 2. As such, the healers have to constantly keep people above 50% health, which gets harder the further into phase 1 you go. Tanks, you'll want to swap on 3 stacks here. The debuff is conal, so move into the raid when you're not tanking. Generally, you'll get the most DPS off on Thok during phase 1. Pop Bloodlust on the pull and nuke him down as hard as you can. If you're a caster, watch his energy and watch his cast bar. Stopping a spell when he starts casting is better than being interrupted. Paladins, you are gods on this fight. Aura Mastery can let the raid heal and damage unhindered, and Hands of Protection on healers can let them continue to heal without fear of interruption. You want to extend phase 1 as long as you can. No matter your role, you'll want to use personal survivability cooldowns when Thok is starting to spam his roar. They'll mitigate tons of damage here. There's so much damage in this phase, be liberal with your application of cooldowns. You'll want Thok at roughly 60 to 65% health after the first phase 1. If you can do that, then you have the DPS to win, assuming no one dies. When he enters phase 2, which he will eventually, then remember to not be near him. Unlike LFR, if you're near him, you'll either be crushed or eaten. Either is instant, unavoidable, horrible death. It's generally a good idea to kite Thok between the corridor you entered and his cage at the back. Never kite him towards the raid. Movement speed abilities help a lot here. A good tip for this is to always assume that the next fixate will be on you, and prepare yourself accordingly. Tanks, you'll want to grab the keys from the jailers and open up the cages as soon as is humanly possible. This is by far the most dangerous phase, and you want it over with as soon as you can. When Thok is reverting from phase 2 to phase 1, he no longer crushes people. As soon as he has changed colour, you're safe to move near him. Tanks, Thok will generally move towards the friendly NPCs to eat them, so be prepared to reposition him as quickly as you can. Remember to not face him near the raid. When regrouping for phase 1, it's a good idea to have someone marked for the group to stack on. Remember, never be in front of or behind Thok. During the green poison phase, dispel as much as you can. During the blue ice phase, kill the ice tombs that appear on top of anyone who gets frozen. During the red fire phase, which you hopefully will never have to do, try to avoid standing in fire while still being grouped. If you're in this phase, Thok needs to be really, really close to death. Once Thok dies, you've completed the wing. Congratulations. Wing 3 has some teeth, so you've earned any loot you acquire here. Thank you for watching this guide. I hope you found it informative. If you have any questions, comments, feedback or thoughts, feel free to comment and rate this video. You can find more guides on my channel, to which I heartily recommend you subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and best of luck with your loot.